Hello, Khalid.
Hi, Mandy. How are you?
I'm wonderful. We're back.
Yes.
Yes, look at me with my Northern Lights background.
That's so
I
cool.
love it. I think these green screens are marvelous. And I mean, this is just one of the ones that comes free with Zoom, you
Hmm.
know, but it's kind of appropriate for what we're talking about.
Yes, it is. It is really.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I know we did the new moon stuff already for the new moon in Cancer that's coming on the 21st of June.
Mhm.
But we felt afterwards that we really needed to do a special video because this is not just any old new moon. And I kind of think we sort of treated it a little bit like, oh, well, new moon in Cancer, that's what it is on Sunday. But it's way, way more than that. It comes at sort of like 7:40 in the morning here in Cambridge, UK, following the summer solstice on the 20th. It absolutely like coincides with it,
Hmm.
which is a really, really big deal. And in actual fact, it's an eclipse as well, which I know you're going to talk about
Hmm.
in a little while. But the summer solstice, I can't speak, summer solstice
Yeah.
or the winter solstice if you were in the southern hemisphere, it's a really, really big deal. I wish I could, I should have written this down, but I need to kind of sort of say the amount of time. No, I've lost it. It's, was it 16 hours and 39 minutes of daylight? I think
I
that's
think that sounds right.
16 hours and 39 minutes of daylight
Yeah.
here in the UK. That's
Crazy.
like extraordinary. And like if you were in north of here, if you were sort of Greenland, Iceland, or, you know, northern Norway, Sweden, up there, 24 hours of daylight.
Yeah.
Imagine that. 24 hours of daylight. And of course, then
I
in the
know.
winter,
Hmm.
I imagine it's 24 hours of darkness, you know.
Yeah.
So the planet is really, really sort of tells you lots of things without having to look at calendars and clocks and things like that. There is a natural kind of, you know, indication of what is going on, and you get this from the solstices and from the equinoxes. You know, you get those four very sort of different times of the year,
Hmm.
and they will have been given this information since anyone that lived here from the year dot would have kind of recognized that. I mean, you
Yes.
can't exactly not notice that it's 24 hours of daylight or 24 hours of darkness, and you know, that's saying something. And the moon, you know, does its monthly cycle, and that goes from a new moon where you get nothing up to a full moon where it's like completely bright, and that's only 2 weeks later. So there's just so much information from the skies that affects us here on Earth, and you know, and that's ancient, and that's why, you know, a main reason why we kind of like do this.
Hmm.
I think it's marvelous. Um, but anyway, yeah, the new moon is right at the very, very beginning of Cancer. There's 30 degrees in a sign, and this is like literally the sun has only just got into Cancer. It's at 0 degrees. It's still got to work. It's going to take it a month to go its whole way around Cancer, and the moon is just kind of like caught up with it, you know, almost on top of its arrival in Cancer. And that has not happened for 19 years and will not happen again for another 19 years. That is
Wow.
another measurement of time that is a pattern, you
Right.
know. And
That's the
so
coincidence between a new moon and the summer solstice date, right?
yes,
Yeah.
yeah, that is a recurring pattern. So this is a big deal. This is a very big deal, and I know you're taking this one pretty seriously personally.
Yeah.
Someone's walking past with their dog. That's my dog is very, very alert. She's saying hello. But I know you're taking this particular full moon very seriously. Tell us why.
Yeah. Oh, why? Because, well, in my birth chart, okay, so the moon is at 3 degrees of Cancer, and the north node is at 11 degrees of Cancer. So there is an aspect that in astrology would be called a conjunction. It's kind of like the north node is working with the moon, and so there are two nodes, and this is actually an astronomical term as well as an astrological one. And so you have a north node and a south node, and basically they refer to points in the moon's orbit around the Earth, where it intersects the plane of the Earth's orbit around the sun. That's just exactly what it is, right?
That yeah. And
Yeah.
well, in a minute, I'm going to ask you to sort of share your chart so
Yes.
people can understand that. I mean, you did try to demonstrate this to me. I mean, I have to sort of like say this on the video.
Yeah.
You did try to demonstrate this to me with your head as the Earth.
Yeah. So yeah, I have a diagram of the
Yes.
moon's
But
orbit on
I
the
did quite like it when your head was the Earth and you were going around it with your little chocolate box as the moon. Khalid has decided to do the conventional thing and show his diagram, right? But anyway, we'll get to that in a minute. But this, so we'll explain a little bit more about what the nodes mean as well and what they are in a second. But because of all of these kind of I don't want to call it coincidences, but there's just too many significant things about this particular new moon that are resonating with you personally, as well. You know, because your personal moon is in Cancer, the moon rules Cancer, and your personal moon is only at 3 degrees Cancer, and the new moon is at 0 degrees Cancer. So that's very, very tight. That's very close. Right. And that there happens to be the eclipse, and also the eclipse is caused, which you will explain in a minute, because of the nodes. And because you have a node that is in the sign of Cancer, you feel a bit of a connection with that.
Yeah.
Even though the node that is causing this hasn't quite made it into Cancer, it's still in Gemini, but it's right on the edge at the time it's caused the eclipse. So you're feeling it. So I'm just going to give this away, that after we've seen your diagram, so everybody understands what we're talking about and the significance of nodes and what they mean psychologically. So we'll get to that. I'm going to give you a tarot reading of what this new moon is all about for you personally. So I've got no idea what's going to come out of this, but that's what we've got to look forward to. But going back, can you first of all, before we see the famous diagram, can you just tell us what the nodes represent, sort of psychologically or meaningfully? How are they interpreted by an astrologer? Because everyone's got nodes. Everyone's got them.
First, just before I go into the astrological kind of interpretation, just astronomically, very simply. So, the orbit of the moon around the Earth, and I'll just show you the diagram that I have here. I'll share my screen and go to here. All right, can you see it, Mandy?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Let me just move this. All right. So you can see that this is the orbit of the moon around the Earth, and you can see that it's inclined.
Is that the moon? That white dot with nothing in it?
Exactly.
Okay. Yeah.
Right. Moon, Earth, Sun.
Yeah.
Orbit of the Earth around the Sun. Orbit of the moon around the Earth. And so you can see that the orbit of the moon around the Earth, relative to the orbit of the Earth around the Sun, is a little bit inclined, right? Inclined at 5 degrees. So the nodes are those points in space where the moon's orbit around the Earth intersects the Earth's orbit around the Sun. And that intersection is what makes eclipses possible, right? Because it's only when you have that alignment, when like the moon, the Earth, and the Sun are all on the kind of the same level, that you have either a solar eclipse possible or a lunar eclipse possible. And basically, a solar eclipse is a new moon that is conjoining a node, and a lunar eclipse is the full moon conjoining a node. That, if that makes sense.
Right. So it would be, hang on. So just with your arrow,
Mm-hmm.
forget what this particular one is. If it was a new moon conjoining a node, the moon has to be on the same degree as the sun for it to be a new moon.
Right, exactly.
So the moon would be between the Earth and the sun.
Yes, correct.
So where could you just point with your arrow roughly where the moon would be that makes it a new moon?
Right. So then the moon would have to be here, right?
Right. Okay. Yeah.
If one of the nodes was here also, then that new moon would be an eclipse. So meaning it would cover either partially or as well as completely as possible the sun. Okay. I don't
Right.
normally. So the north node is given to that point in space where the moon is rising in its kind of slanted orbit. So usually this would be, oh, it is called ascending lunar node. So ascending lunar node means north node, but usually in an astrology chart you'll find this symbol representing the north node and this symbol representing the south node. Okay, so as it rises in this inclined orbit, it's crossing the lunar node, which is just this abstract point of in space, a
Yeah.
point of intersection. And then
Yeah.
as it goes down, well, it would be around 2 weeks later, I suppose, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it would cross the descending point, which is called the south node. And that's it.
Where would the moon be to be a full moon then?
A full moon. So for it to be a full moon, it would have to be on the on this end. On this
Yes.
end,
Yes.
on this
Yeah.
end, right? Yeah. So that the Earth comes between the moon and the sun, blocking the sun's light, and then making the moon invisible. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, my dog enjoyed that. Okay. Very good. Okay. Very good. So we understand the astronomy
Right.
of the nodes, and so they are not actual. They're not actual rocks or balls of fire or anything. They are just. They are just points. They're like a crossroads. They're just where two paths cross. That's what they are.
So
Okay, that's fine.
Astrologically, they are discussed as a polar axis, right? So if you just look at the chart again, right?
Yes.
If you consider this as what's called the ecliptic, so the apparent path that the Earth takes around the sun, which allows it to see the zodiac signs around the sun.
Yeah.
So the nodes, you can see them pointing in different directions, right? So
yes.
This is why when you see the nodes represented on an astrological birth chart, you'll see, for example, north node in Cancer, and then opposite from it exactly by degree and by minute, you'll see south node in Capricorn, because these are the opposite signs. You know,
because it's on an axis that doesn't ever move,
right.
So they're exact opposite. So if the whole circle is 360 degrees, they are 180 degrees from each other.
Exactly, right. So what changes is the axis. The axis, most of the time, the nodal axis, as it's called, it moves back. So it's got this motion called retrograde, because contrary to the other planets, it doesn't move counterclockwise. It moves actually clockwise. So it goes back through the signs, and it usually takes around 1.6 years to leave a sign and enter another sign, and 19 years to return to its same position, right? So now the north node is in 29 degrees Gemini. I guess in 1.6 years it would enter 29 degrees Cancer, and then in 19 years it would go back to 29 degrees Gemini. Okay.
And so it will happen again on that new moon in 19 years' time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
yeah, so astrologically, what do the nodes mean? So the North Node in astrology, okay, so it points us to um, that area. Okay, the types of experiences that in this lifetime we're supposed to push ourselves toward in
Yeah.
order to develop and evolve. That's the idea, basically.
Right. Okay.
Whereas the South Node represents those experiences that we have to transcend or have less of in order to evolve, right? And
So it's what to move away from and what to
yes,
move towards.
right. So
Simple as that, really.
right.
Yeah.
So, and that polarity is informed by the polarity of the signs and the houses in which the nodes are located when you are born, right?
And what are your south and north node
Right.
in your
So,
birth
so
chart?
I've got my North Node in Cancer in the seventh house, and my South
Yes.
Node in Capricorn in the first house. And so, very in a very summary kind of way, what that means is that in this lifetime, um,
Yes.
I am sort of destined slash pushed to move away from a focus on myself and my own identity, and towards a focus on kind of finding myself in more intimate relationships. And that's basically a movement from first house issues towards
Yes.
seventh house issues. Like in the first house, you're busy exploring yourself, what motivates you, what makes you you and different from others, right? It's all
Yes.
about kind of being kind of attached to your own inner gravity. And then the
Yes.
seventh house, it's about building intimate relationships with others. Could be romantic relationships, could be business relationships, partnerships. But kind of sort of finding yourself through those intimate relationships. So like stepping out of your own gravity and moving towards the gravity of another, right?
So
Um,
just to sort of interject a little bit there,
yeah,
okay. So based on the concept of nodes, I mean that's the way round it is for you. So it's to kind of like for you to kind of become less independent and more kind of like gain more allow yourself to kind of get to
hmm,
share and to gain from other people. But if you happened to be the other way round, which obviously a lot
yeah,
of people would be, theirs would be to kind of not to be so dependent on other people and find
yeah,
themselves and to kind of like aspire to being more independent. It's
yeah.
very interesting, isn't it?
It
How
is. It
they,
really is.
yeah,
And
very related, but
yeah,
yeah,
yeah. And the sign polarity adds like another level to the
go on,
interpretation,
yeah,
right? So if your North Node is in Cancer and your South Node is in Capricorn, that also means that you need to work on developing during this lifetime, you need to work on developing qualities of nurturing the other and kind of focusing on your emotional world and like cultivating a sense of belonging and attachment and roots. That is really about your inner emotional landscape and your emotional comfort zone. Okay. Whereas with Capricorn, like if you have South Node in Capricorn, what you're leaving behind is an attachment to outer social structures that involve like status and hierarchy and kind of, a lot of material considerations and practical considerations, It's kind of like a Capricorn, I would say, is the sign that's really most, I mean, relative to the others, it's like most closely associated with mm, social reality with all of its restrictions, right? Like the structure of the economy, for example, or like the structure of political relations or national level, international level, gender relations, all of like everything systemic, basically, right? Um, so yeah, it's like that South Node in Capricorn opposing North Node in Cancer. It's kind of suggesting that there's a pretty dramatic life story that you have to leave behind a self that has been molded by really sort of kind of cold and
Is it like social conditioning?
yeah, social conditioning, exactly. Thank you. Because leaving behind a self that has been molded by a lot of social factors that are not about yourself, your inner landscape, and moving toward a self that finds itself in a very emotional way through intimate relationships, right? Relationships
Yeah,
that don't
nice.
involve structure and status and system. Yeah.
So it's a looser kind of like freedom
Yeah.
thing, really. But
Yeah.
yeah. And would you say that you're making progress towards that? Have you felt that at all?
I would say so, yes.
Noticeably? Okay.
Yes, I would definitely.
Well,
But
shall we do the tarot reading
yeah,
and see what the tarot has to say
all
in
right.
relation to this? It's just going to be a little quick, little fun reading, but
Yeah.
directly related to this. And
Just,
obviously both, yeah, sorry, colleague, yeah?
yeah, just one thing I forgot to mention is that you asked me if I'm making progress towards that. And so basically the conjunction that's happening now, I mean, this is going to happen on the 21st between the moon and the sun,
Yes.
is also happening in my seventh house, right? Because I have the moon and the north node in the seventh house.
Yes, yes, yes,
So
yes.
so basically, you can think of that new moon slash annular eclipse.
So it's a very, very seventh house experience for
Yes,
you, this.
triggering a seventh house.
Okay, so I want to make sure I get my question absolutely accurate then. So, okay, so this tarot reading is for Khalid, right? And it's directly on the fact that there's going to be this very significant new moon on Sunday the 21st of June 2020.
Mm-hmm.
And the new moon is in Cancer.
Mm-hmm.
His personal moon in his chart is at 3 degrees Cancer, and the moon in the sky is going to be at 0 degrees Cancer. It's also happening on the summer solstice.
Mm-hmm.
The new moon is caused by a conjunction, so a very, very close connection with the North Node in the sky. And although the North Node in the sky is in Gemini, it's right at the very tail end of Gemini. So it's almost in Cancer, but it isn't in Cancer. We are aware of that. But it is within...
it's 1 degree.
It's 1 degree from Cancer, and and your North Node in your personal birth chart is 11 degrees Cancer. So there's a connection there. It's not tight. The moon is a tight connection, but the North Node, which is the reason for all of this happening and there being the eclipse, we are taking that into consideration. But and the other thing that's really relevant is all of this is triggering his seventh house, which is the house of, in his birth chart and in the sky, it's all on his seventh house, which is the house of relationships, close partnerships, and his North Node is all about kind of progressing and sort of evolving from a Capricorn South Node, which is all about social conditioning, through to a Cancer North Node, which is much more about kind of emotions and free thinking and just gaining things from other people. So my tarot reading is quite simple. What I want to know is what advice should I give to Khalid? In the first two cards, I'm going to say, what should he focus on? What should he do in order to kind of benefit the most from this energy? What should he do? Secondly, what should he avoid doing? So what should he go towards? What should he move away from? And the third card is simply going to be, how will this play out for him? What effect will this particular energy have for him as he moves forward on his Capricorn Cancer nodal axis? It was a mouthful. How was that for a question?
Great. I love it. I love it.
Okay. Here we go.
Excited. Yeah.
Yeah, got it. Okay, so what should you do in order to evolve and move forward? First card. Slow down, baby. That's what you have to. Do you know what card this is? It
Slow
is the
down.
Knight of Swords
Oh,
reversed. Very easy to read.
okay.
Yeah, you need to slow down and kind of, yeah, because the Knight of Swords in the upright position is a fantastically positive card under the right circumstances. But I think the downside of the Knight of Swords is that sometimes you can just go so fast that you miss things along the way. And I kind of feel that this whole Cancer thing is kind of like telling you to emote. And how can you emote if you've missed it? You know, stop and smell the roses, stop and hear the birds sing, you know, slow down and take it all in. That's what you should do.
Mm-hmm.
And this is in order to kind of have meaningful relationships, because this is in your 7th house. Now, this could also extend to having a meaningful relationship with your environment, you know. But I also feel that if you're with people, you will have just a more enriching time if the people that you are with, you're like me, you've got a very active mind. And I kind of think sometimes to switch our minds off or slow our minds down a bit, there is stuff to be gained from this, and that's the message that's come up for you. And to share that with whoever you're with. Okay, so what should you avoid doing? This is a really hard card. This is really hard for me to interpret, considering what the question is. So let me just get this before I tell you the card. What should you not do? Cut yourself off. Don't cut yourself off. And this was really hard for me to kind of interpret this, because this is such a beautiful card. And the question was clear. What should you avoid doing? And I think if you find something you're so attached to that you just consume yourself with that one thing and put yourself on a little island with it, you're going to miss a lot of what else is going on. It's clearly the answer to the question. Queen of Cups upright, what not to do. And I do see her on a little bit of her own little island and in her own little world. And I kind of like feel, don't, because this is so much about your 7th house, it would be very easy to get into a little bubble. Don't do that.
I feel like wow. I mean, you know how in the court, many tarot scholars / tarot designers, they've attached like certain court cards to certain zodiac signs, and some of them attached Queen of Cups specifically to Cancer.
Yes,
so I feel like this is very relevant. And for me, I always had a very deep identification with the Queen of Cups, specifically as a symbol of the Cancer personality, you know? So when I hear you tell me that, it's kind of like, yeah, don't get stuck in being Cancer in a kind of introverted way.
It's almost, I can almost see a little bit of Scorpio in that card because of those sort of claw things on the samovar or whatever that object is that she's holding. And I kind of like feel if you get too stuck on one thing or one person, you know, you're missing out, the same as that is saying that you are missing out. So it's kind of, it's getting the balance there is the tricky thing, isn't it? Really,
it's actually being
I know what you mean though. I would have put Queen of Cups as Cancer.
Like the cup, I'm seeing that cup is like my own brain, my own thoughts, you know. Sometimes fantasies even, you know.
Okay, so the last card is what is this all going to kind of lead to for you in terms of your evolution, which is what the axis of the nodes are all about. Give me a moment. Okay. Okay, so I'm kind of like seeing this as, I feel that you will start to kind of I think you'll be able to move forward. I'm going to go really simple here. I think you'll be able to move forward and take up on all the new things that you discover, because you've slowed down and allowed yourself to sort of enjoy things. That rushing and overdoing it is going to kind of ruin for you. Also, being too stuck on one thing or one person is limiting you. And I feel that you'll actually start to be able to move forward without looking back. I think your life will become sort of flooded with so many kind of like new things and new experiences. Eventually you'll realize that you're not being pulled back towards all that social conditioning and all the kind of idealistic, perhaps an idealistic oh God, what's the word? An idealism about being in the perfect relationship. I kind of like feel that if you're just living it, you'll just realize that the relationship that gives you the more freedom is actually much more suited to you than the all sort of suffocating, the one and only kind of everything rolled up into one thing, if that makes sense. I feel this is a bit of a test for you, this eclipse, to be honest. But I feel if you actually can make yourself do it, I feel that you'll definitely come out of this without looking back. I've got the 7 of Swords in reverse, and I took the reversal as meaning he just keeps going with all the stuff that he's kind of like accumulated and stops looking back on kind of what he might have still been achieving if he was in that kind of corporate oh, hang on, sorry, I should have switched my phone off, you know, environment. So yeah, that's what I got. So does that all make sense to you?
Yeah.
So to hold them up, I've got the Knight of Swords reversed on what to do, slow down. I've got the Queen of Cups upright on what not to do. Don't get too in love with the idea of rolling it all into kind of like one thing, one person. You know, there's lots of choices and things out there that is going to kind of like, having that freedom is going to be really enriching for you, and keeping your options open. And I feel that you will not look back. I really do feel have I got that upside down here? I really do feel the journey is really, really pulling away from that South Node, which is exactly what you want. And you know, like sometimes when you've got a baby or whatever, well, you might not know this, but I've had babies, but you know, they have growth spurts. It's kind of like they seem the same, and all of a sudden in a sort of short space of time, they make these huge advances, and then they never go back to where they were before they could sit up. They don't go back to not being able to sit up again, or, you know, suddenly they can do it, or suddenly they can walk. And they don't then suddenly go back to not being able to walk again. And it's kind of, that's gone. And I'm really feeling that with him. I'm really feeling that you will make notable progress that you don't go back to. But you need to kind of act upon these two in order to achieve that.
Yeah, that's great.
And because that is a slightly harsh card, it's slightly harsh, I feel you might find this a little bit harder to do than just oh you've had the reading and that's it. I kind of like feel you might sort of slip a little bit, but I think you will eventually get it and get in the kind of groove, and you know, and you're there. I hope it doesn't take you 19 years to achieve it. That's my wish.
Mine as well. Yeah.
My little nodal tarot reading, and just to sort of let everyone know, like Khalid is also very capable of doing brilliant tarot readings as well. He's done many for me, and we can do very in-depth tarot readings. And if if you are interested to know what your nodes are, or your moon, or anything relating to your moon, come to us. We'll leave our contact details on this email. Come to us. Get in touch. We can book you in for a full reading. it will be all the more accurate if you know your date, time, and place of birth. And it's very fascinating to mix the two things together, the astrology with the tarot. You can get a lot of information from it.
Yes,
So thank you for
absolutely.
listening. Yeah, and final words.
I just loved it. Thanks for the reading. And
Pleasure.
yeah, I think I'm probably gonna monitor my thoughts, my feelings closely during this triple event, the new moon,
Yes,
eclipse, the summer solstice, and yeah, I think I'm probably gonna keep on doing that for a month and see what changes.
and let's all spare a thought to the people who are having 24 hours of daylight.
Yes.
Maybe,
Wow,
maybe
that's
they love it. I'd love to hear from. I'd love to hear from them. Okay, right.
amazing.
Bye for now.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.
Take care. Bye bye.